Have you ever been sitting at your desk, like just staring at a blank email draft, and you are completely paralyzed by a simple spelling mistake?
Oh, absolutely. Like your brain just entirely short circuits.
Right. You know the exact feeling. You are terrified to misspell a colleague's name or maybe worse, a massive new client's name. So you just
Yeah, you
freeze.
just stare at the blinking cursor, totally stuck.
Exactly. You open a new tab, you search their LinkedIn, you cross-reference it with their company directory, maybe even check their Twitter, just to make absolutely sure you didn't, miss a double consonant or a hidden vowel somewhere in there.
Because the professional anxiety is just so real.
It really is. We have all been there. It is this universal professional anxiety. But what if that momentary lapse in spelling ability, like a genuine hilarious moment of orthographic panic, actually created one of the most recognizable multi-billion-dollar brands in modern history?
I mean, it completely subverts how we assume these massive corporate empires are built.
Right.
There is this persistent myth that every major brand identity is the result of like months of algorithmic testing and focus groups and highly paid branding consultants sitting in glass boardrooms debating color theory.
Yeah, we assume there is this deep, strategic, almost impenetrable matrix behind every single decision. But today, well, we are going to look at a fascinating snapshot of the internet that shatters that illusion completely before taking us down a massive, massive rabbit hole.
It is quite the time capsule.
It really is. We are jumping into a snapshot from Friday, May 2026. This is from a blog called Netizen, run by an author and thinker named Paramendra. And the main article is an incredibly revealing, hilarious behind-the-scenes look at the birth of the venture capital giant known as A16.
But the funny thing is the A16 story is really just the tip of the iceberg here.
Oh, yeah, it's just the anchor. Because the cultural and technological ecosystem of 2026 surrounding this story is, frankly, borderline sci-fi.
It's wild.
So we are going to unpack this humorous origin story of a tech empire, and then we're going to zoom out to explore the wild reality of agentic AI, the virtualization of physical supply chains, geopolitical realignments, and even the rise of spiritual economics. Okay, let's unpack this.
The origin story of A16z is really the perfect entry point because it grounds everything that follows in just basic human frailty.
Right, because venture capital is usually so intense.
Exactly. We're talking about the absolute highest echelons of venture capital, a space where founders are pitching nine-figure valuations for, concepts like drone-delivered oat milk lattes.
And everyone takes themselves so seriously.
Oh, completely. But in the middle of this high-stakes Silicon Valley intensity, Ben Horowitz, one of the founders, hit a wall he simply could not scale. He literally could not spell his partner, Marc Andreessen's last name.
I mean, let's be fair. It is a total landmine of a name.
Oh, for sure.
It's this linguistic trap of double vowels and double consonants. So they are in the founding meeting for their new firm. They are staring at a blank legal pad. Marc suggests they call it Andreessen Horowitz. Ben agrees and then asks Marc to, spell it for the lawyers taking notes.
And as Marc starts spelling like A-N-D-R-E, Ben just stops him.
He literally says, whoa, 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 slow down, Shakespeare. He's like, are there 2 E's or 3? Is there a silent Q in there? Do I need to hire a Norwegian to pronounce it? It is absurdly relatable.
The blog author notes that Ben confessed his keyboard basically files a restraining order every time he tries to type it, which is just such a great image.
It's hilarious.
They actually spent 15 minutes generating increasingly tragic misspellings on this legal pad. They had Andreessen, Anderson with a Z, and the absolute peak of the panic, Androidson.
Oh my God, Androidson sounds like an evil robotics corporation from like an 80s sci-fi movie. It's fantastic.
It really does.
But here's where the pivot happens. Instead of just learning how to spell the name, which, let's be honest, would take maybe 10 minutes of rote memorization or just a post-it note on his monitor, they take a completely different path.
A very tech founder path.
Right. It's like dodging a pothole on your daily commute by deciding to buy a helicopter instead of just, fixing the road. They decide to go numerical. They take the A for Andreessen, the Z for the last letter of Horowitz, and slap a 16 in the middle to represent the 16 letters in between.
I would actually push back slightly on the helicopter analogy, because buying a helicopter is a massive exertion of effort. What they did here was actually an exercise in profound, almost weaponized laziness, which somehow morphed into genius branding.
Okay, weaponized laziness. I like that.
Yeah, the source points out that this wasn't some sophisticated alphanumeric strategy. Ben Horowitz later joked that 16 is just the number of letters you have to survive before you can legally change your name. It was essentially a middle finger to the concept of traditional spelling.
The source literally calls it Silicon Valley's greatest troll. I love that framing. Because if you think about the psychological dominance of that name, it acts as this bizarre form of group therapy for the entire tech industry.
Oh, completely. It validates everyone's insecurity.
Exactly. By naming the firm a16z, they validated the collective anxiety of every single journalist, podcaster, and ambitious product manager who has ever had to quietly open a Google tab to figure out how to spell Andreessen. The author dares the reader right there in the text to try typing it without looking.
And you hesitate. Everyone hesitates. What's fascinating here is what this does from a power dynamic perspective.
How so?
When you force the entire industry to adopt a numerical workaround just to talk about you, you are basically setting the terms of engagement. The people who want to sound like insiders pronounce it a 16z, while outsiders stumble over it.
That makes total sense. And Marc Andreessen didn't complain about having his name erased into a number because, well, he got an empire built on an unspellable foundation.
Right. It's a masterclass in leaning into a flaw.
Yeah.
The legacy of this orthographic panic is literally printed on the branded notepads in their offices.
I saw that. When nervous founders come in to pitch, the associates just slide over a notepad that says a16z because life's too short to Google the same last name twice.
Yeah, so Ben Horowitz is sitting there watching highly educated founders butcher the name in pitch emails and just writing 8-figure checks.
It reminds you that before these titans of industry were managing billions of dollars and funding the foundational architecture of the future, they were just two guys staring at a legal pad, totally lost in the woods over a double S.
It really humanizes the whole space.
It does. But if we zoom out from that legal pad, the landscape of 2026 that this venture capital money is funding is terrifyingly advanced.
The contrast is pretty stark.
Yeah. We're moving from a funny naming convention to a completely transformed technological reality. The data from the 2026 tech ecosystem shows a massive, fundamental shift in computing paradigms. We see a blog title listed on the side of the page that declares, "The party is over," from vibe coding to agentic engineering.
That is a huge statement.
And we also see agentic AI set to explode in 2026. So agentic seems to be the defining characteristic of this era.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
To understand the magnitude of that shift, we really have to look at the mechanisms of how we interact with machines. So vibe coding was a term that started popping up around, say, 2024 and 2025.
Okay. What exactly does that mean?
It referred to developers using large language models to casually generate code through natural language prompts. You were sort of steering the AI by giving it the vibe or the general direction of what you wanted, but the human was still very much the pilot. You had to review the code, piece it together, and actually deploy it.
So the human was essentially the general contractor, and the AI was the subcontractor laying the bricks. But the headline says the party is over. So what breaks that model? Why move away from vibe coding?
The bottleneck was human attention. Vibe coding still requires you to constantly prompt and verify. The shift to agentic engineering removes the human from the execution loop entirely.
Entirely, like completely hands-off.
Yes, we have moved from AI as a reactive assistant to AI as an autonomous agent. Agentic AI doesn't just write a block of code when you ask it to. You give it a high-level goal like, build me a secure payment gateway for this application.
And then what? It just builds the whole thing.
The agent breaks that goal down into subtasks, writes the code, tests it against the database, debugs its own errors, and pushes it to production, all without human intervention.
Oh, wow. It's the difference between having a really smart dictionary and having a dedicated employee who literally never sleeps.
Precisely.
But wait, that level of autonomy must require an absurd amount of processing power, right? If the AI is constantly running background tasks, testing and iterating without a human hitting enter for every step, the server load basically never drops.
Which brings us directly to the hardware reality of 2026. You cannot run continuous autonomous agents on the cloud infrastructure that was built for reactive search queries. It just doesn't work.
And that explains the headline that genuinely stopped me in my tracks when I was looking through this snapshot.
The SpaceX one.
Yes. We see a New York Times technology headline from this page. Elon Musk's SpaceX, plans $55 billion investment to make AI chips.
It's a staggering number.
My immediate reaction to this was utter confusion. Like, SpaceX building AI chips feels like a rocket company deciding they need to manufacture their own brain tissue. Why pivot $55 billion, which is a nation-state level GDP, to silicon, when your stated singular goal is colonizing Mars?
Right. It seems like a distraction. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, I'd argue it's not a pivot away from Mars at all. It's the realization of what surviving on Mars actually requires.
Wait, really? How does silicon help you on Mars?
Look at the physics of communication. The latency between Earth and Mars can be anywhere from 4 to 24 minutes, depending on planetary alignment.
Right, because of the speed of light.
Exactly. You cannot run a colony, land a spacecraft, or operate complex life support systems if you have to wait 48 minutes round trip for an Earth-based AI to process a command and send back the code.
Oh, that makes total sense. If a valve blows on a habitat module, you can't query an Earth server for the fix. The intelligence has to be local.
Exactly. Mars requires local, autonomous compute. But beyond the space application, in 2026, compute is the ultimate currency on Earth as well.
Compute is currency.
Yes. If you are relying entirely on external suppliers like NVIDIA or TSMC for the core engine of your intelligence, you have a massive strategic vulnerability. We actually see another headline here. Anthropic is doubling Claude code rate limits after deal with SpaceX.
Okay, so SpaceX is building the physical hardware, the silicon, and then trading that compute power to Anthropic in exchange for access to their foundational AI models.
Exactly.
It's a barter system. But instead of trading like grain for lumber, they are trading silicon for intelligence.
And notice the underlying tension there. Another piece on the blog highlights that Elon Musk and Sam Altman are cooperating on AI safety, competing on compute.
That sounds like a fragile alliance.
It is. They are locked in an arms race to own the physical servers that run the world, even while they collaborate to ensure the software running on those servers doesn't go completely rogue.
And the risk of it going rogue is apparently very, very real. There is a deeply unsettling VentureBeat headline listed here. Anthropic skill scanners passed every check. The malicious code wrote in on a test file.
That one is chilling.
If I'm understanding this correctly, the AI's own internal security systems, like the automated guards at the gate, gave the green light. But a piece of malicious code managed to sneak through by disguising itself inside a seemingly harmless test file.
This is the dark side of agentic AI. When AI systems are autonomous, they are communicating with other AI systems constantly at speeds we can't monitor.
So a human didn't write that virus.
A human didn't write that malicious test file and try to hack the mainframe. No. It's highly likely that one AI agent, intentionally or accidentally, generated a payload that exploited a blind spot in another AI agent's logic.
Oh, wow.
Traditional security checkpoints like scanning for known malware signatures fail completely when the code is being dynamically generated on the fly by an intelligence that understands exactly how your scanner works.
It's like an immune system fighting a virus that can rewrite its own DNA in real time.
That's a great way to put it. So if the software layer is inherently vulnerable to agentic manipulation, your only true defense is at the hardware layer. You have to physically own the chips and the architecture to literally cut the power if things go wrong.
Which requires energy. You cannot run a $55 billion dedicated chip farm on standard grid power. The compute density of agentic models requires power on a scale we haven't seen since the Industrial Revolution.
And the data supports that perfectly.
Yeah, there is a blog title here, U.S. Energy Demand by 2035, and an NVIDIA blog post about powering the next American century. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright and NVIDIA's Ian Buck on the Genesis mission.
The Genesis mission.
Right. They are literally treating AI infrastructure as a national Genesis mission. They are sitting down with the highest levels of the federal government because AI is no longer just a software product. It is a fundamental utility like water or electricity, but it's draining the reserves of both.
When AI transitions from software you query to agents that constantly operate, the power draw becomes the primary bottleneck for technological advancement. If you don't rewrite the energy grid, the AI revolution simply halts.
So if the AI requires this massive accumulation of physical infrastructure, the chips, the copper wiring, the cooling towers, the nuclear reactors to power it, then the digital world is essentially forcing itself into the physical world.
It is bleeding into reality.
And that brings us to a concept the blog author, Paramendra, writes about obsessively. When you look at his catalog on the page, there is a recurring theme of the cloud manifesting into physical reality. He has a book titled Physical AWS, how the logistics cloud will reshape global commerce and ignite the age of abundance.
It is a profound conceptual leap.
I have to admit, when I first read Physical AWS, my brain just pictured someone trying to download an entire Amazon fulfillment center into their living room.
Yeah, it sounds a bit clunky.
It sounds like an oxymoron.
Okay.
How does a cloud, which is defined by its digital, weightless nature, become physical?
Consider the mechanism of what Amazon Web Services actually did for software. Before AWS, if you wanted to launch a software startup, the barrier to entry was physical and heavy.
You needed actual servers.
You had to buy physical server racks, rent a climate-controlled room, hire technicians to maintain the hardware, and negotiate bandwidth. It was incredibly capital-intensive. What AWS did was virtualize the hardware. They built massive server farms, and they allowed developers to just call an API a line of code to spin up a server in milliseconds. They turned physical hardware into a digital utility.
So democratized software. You just rented a tiny slice of their massive infrastructure instead of building your own.
Exactly. Now, apply that exact same mechanism to the physical movement of goods. Let's say you invent a new type of water bottle.
Okay.
Today, you have to find a manufacturer in Asia, negotiate shipping containers, deal with customs, rent warehouse space in the U.S., hire staff to pack boxes, and contract with FedEx for delivery. The barrier to entry for physical commerce is as heavy today as software was in 1999.
So a logistics cloud, or physical AWS, is an attempt to API-ify the physical world.
Precisely. Imagine a global, fully automated physical infrastructure. You don't build a supply chain, you simply plug your product into the logistics cloud.
How does that work in practice?
You send a digital command, and an autonomous factory produces the bottle. An automated Hyperloop system transports it to a regional distribution hub managed by agentic AI, and an autonomous drone delivers it directly to the customer.
Oh, wow.
The creator of the product never touches a cardboard box. The physical world becomes a plug-and-play utility.
That is mind-blowing. It's like the electrical grid. You don't build a coal power plant in your backyard just to turn on your toaster. You just plug it into the wall and the grid handles the rest.
Yes.
Physical AWS means plugging your physical product into a wall, and the global supply chain handles the rest.
Yeah, and building that kind of grid is what leads to Paramendra's concept of moving from a unicorn to Solara.
Yeah.
We know a unicorn is a tech startup valued at over $1 billion. But $1 billion in 2026 is just table stakes.
Right.
He writes about Lumina AI, the trillion-dollar sun, and unicorn to Solara with purpose. Marketing, mergers, and responsible capitalism.
$1 trillion sun. That implies an entity with its own massive gravitational pull.
It does. A Solara isn't just a company with a high market cap because they built a highly addictive social media algorithm. A Solara achieves a $1 trillion valuation because it is fundamentally rewriting the physical infrastructure of the planet.
So it's foundational.
Exactly. It is providing the light and heat, the logistics cloud, the agentic compute, that allows thousands of other companies to exist in its orbit.
And we see the physical ambition of these Solaras reflected elsewhere in the snapshot. There's a post titled Earth-to-Earth Rocketry plus Hyperloop, Earth before Mars. So while SpaceX is building chips for Mars, the immediate application is terrestrial.
They want to fix Earth first.
Right. They are using rocketry and vacuum tubes to create a frictionless physical world. They want to move a cargo container from Tokyo to New York in 45 minutes.
They are attempting to conquer distance and time on a planetary scale. It's incredibly ambitious.
But this is where the snapshot from 2026 takes a wildly unexpected, almost dizzying turn. Building $1 trillion Solara, managing an agentic AI that thinks for itself, and automating the entire physical supply chain of the planet, you cannot run that level of power on the old operating system of quarterly corporate profits.
No, the societal implications are just too vast.
And the source material reflects a massive philosophical crisis because of this. Right below the humorous a16z spelling story, there is a line that gave me absolute whiplash.
It is the moment the data pivots from engineering to theology, basically.
Yes. The line reads, "The impending age of abundance was prophesied in the scriptures thousands of years ago."
There's a huge shift in tone.
And then you look at his book list. Right alongside titles about agentic AI and physical AWS, you have Calciism, the economic and spiritual blueprint for an age of abundance. He has another book called Velocity Money, Crypto, Karma, and the End of Traditional Economics. He even mentions trying to fund stage 1 of the Calcius project in Nepal for 100 crores.
It is a striking juxtaposition. But if you look closely at the underlying mechanisms of what AI is doing to society, It is actually entirely logical.
Okay, I'm going to need you to walk me through the logic here, because going from Ben Horowitz forgetting how to spell a name to literal prophecy and something called karmaism feels like finding a fortune cookie baked inside your company's quarterly earnings report.
That's a fair reaction.
How do karma and crypto even mix? What is the actual theory here?
This raises an important question. We have to look at the psychological and economic vacuum created by agentic AI. When you have headlines on this page explicitly stating AI and robotics break capitalism, you have to ask how they break it.
Right.
Traditional capitalism is an exchange of human labor for capital. You work, you get paid, you buy goods. But if agentic AI and the logistics cloud can design the product, manufacture the product, and deliver the product with zero human labor, the value of human labor drops to zero.
If a robot does my job faster, cheaper, and without needing health insurance, capitalism as a mechanism for wealth distribution completely stalls out. If nobody has a job, nobody can buy the goods the autonomous factories are producing.
Exactly. The engine floods. So the tech visionaries of 2026 are staring down the barrel of an age of abundance, where energy and physical goods are practically free, but they have no economic model to distribute that abundance.
So they panic.
They are desperately searching for a new structural paradigm. Kalkiism references Kalki, the prophesied 10th and final avatar of the Hindu god Vishnu. In Hindu eschatology, Kalki arrives at the end of the Kali Yuga, which is the darkest, most destructive epoch of humanity, to cleanse the world and usher in a new era of truth and purity.
Wait, so they are looking at the arrival of artificial general intelligence not as a software update, but as an eschatological event. They are framing AGI as the end of an epoch.
They are. They are using ancient spiritual frameworks to manage modern technological terror. When he talks about Kalkiism, the economic and spiritual blueprint, and velocity money, crypto, karma, he is attempting to quantify spiritual and social value because labor value is gone.
Let me see if I get this. If we are combining karma and crypto, my guess is they are trying to create a blockchain ledger, not for financial transactions, but for social good, like a decentralized morality score.
That is a very sound theory.
If you can't earn money by working a spreadsheet, maybe you earn velocity money by demonstrating positive social impact, and that impact is immutably tracked on a blockchain.
Yes. If traditional fiat currency is tied to a broken labor market, a new currency must be tied to a different metric of human output. We see another title on the blog, AI-era social network, reimagined for truth, trust, and transformation. And another post titled, Not Capital, Not Technology, but Putting Humanity at the Center. In a world where deep fakes make truth highly subjective and autonomous agents are running the physical world, merging technology with a spiritual, karma-based economic model is being pitched as the only way to keep humanity from becoming completely obsolete.
It is a desperate attempt to keep the human soul intact when the machines can outthink us. He has a book called The Last Age, Lord Kalki, Prophecy, and the Final War for Peace.
Sounds incredibly dramatic.
Apocalyptic even. But when you look at the sheer scale of the power they are wielding, creating autonomous digital minds and planetary supply chains, you understand why the language has to become prophetic. Standard corporate speak just cannot articulate the stakes anymore.
Exactly. They're searching for an operating system for humanity in the post-labor era.
And this blending of technology, biology, and life force isn't just theoretical philosophy in 2026. If we look at the medical and biological data scattered across the snapshot, we see that AI is actively being deployed to rewrite the code of human health.
The convergence of biology and technology here represents perhaps the most intimate application of agentic AI. We move from the global logistics cloud to the microscopic environment of the cell.
The evidence here is wild. Paramendra has a book listed called Pregenetics, the technology that lets us watch life think, how photons, cells, and AI may help us cure cancer and rewrite medicine.
It's a fascinating concept.
We also see a blog post from DeepMind about an AI co-clinician. There's a piece from Singularity Hub exploring why the heart rarely gets cancer, and a Slashdot report noting that a single dose of magic mushrooms can cause anatomical brain changes.
It is a full-spectrum assault on biological mysteries, utilizing both extreme digital computation and organic compounds.
Let's break down Pregenetics. The subtitle claims it lets us watch life think using photons. I need to understand the mechanism here. Are we talking about literal glow-in-the-dark cells communicating with a computer, or is this just like a poetic tech bro marketing for a slightly better electron microscope?
No, it is much more profound than a better microscope. It points to a concept known as optogenetics and bioluminescence imaging, supercharged by AI.
Okay, how does that work?
Let's look at the how. Currently, biological research is often static. We take a biopsy, we freeze the tissue, we dye it, and we look at dead cells to guess what they were doing when they were alive.
It's like trying to understand a football game by looking at a single photograph of the players on the field.
Perfect analogy.
Oh.
What precigenetics implies is using photons light to observe cellular interactions dynamically, in real time. Scientists can engineer cells to emit specific wavelengths of light when certain proteins fold or when a synapse fires.
That's incredible.
But the amount of data generated by millions of cells flashing in real time is incomprehensible to the human eye or standard software.
But it's not incomprehensible to an agentic AI.
Exactly. You feed that massive, continuous stream of photonic data into an AI model. The AI isn't just taking a snapshot. It is analyzing the patterns of the flashes. It is watching the biological algorithms execute in real time. That is what he means by watching life think.
Wow.
We move into what he calls liquid computing, the future of human-tech symbiosis.
And when you combine that real-time observation with another headline on the page that says, AI lets chemists design molecules by simply describing them, the boundaries between biology and code completely dissolve.
Think about the workflow. The AI observes the cancer cells communicating via photons. It identifies the exact biological mechanism the cancer is using to evade the immune system.
Okay.
Then an agentic AI in a pharmaceutical lab uses natural language to design a custom molecule, a bespoke protein, specifically shaped to block that communication pathway.
It's no longer trial and error chemistry. It's not mixing compounds in a beaker and hoping the mice survive. You are debugging biology like it's a faulty software application.
You are literally programming the human body. And what's fascinating is the juxtaposition of this hyper-advanced silicon-based molecule design with the Slashdot article about magic mushrooms.
Right, the finding that a single dose of a psychedelic can cause anatomical bone changes?
Yes, it highlights a dual approach in 2026. On one hand, we are using trillion-dollar AI models to engineer synthetic cures. On the other hand, we are applying that same analytical rigor to ancient, naturally occurring organic compounds.
So they are looking at nature, too.
Exactly. Why does psilocybin alter the physical neuroplasticity of the brain? The AI is being used to map the mechanisms of psychedelics to cure mental health crises just as aggressively as it is mapping cancer cells.
It shows that humanity is throwing every single tool in the box at the problem of human suffering. We are looking at photons and neural networks, but we are also looking at mushrooms and ancient Kalki prophecies.
It's all connected.
It is this desperate, beautiful attempt to hack the human condition from every conceivable angle. You cure the physical body with precigenetics, you rewire the traumatized mind with psychedelics, and you attempt to cure the societal soul with Kalkiism.
It is a holistic, albeit chaotic, approach to managing the age of abundance.
However, curing disease and unlocking this utopian abundance does not happen in a vacuum. It is colliding head-on with a very messy, very divided, and highly volatile geopolitical landscape.
Very true.
And before we get into this, I want to make something very clear to you, the listener. As we look at the cultural and political texts scattered throughout this snapshot, we are acting entirely as neutral observers. I'm just looking at the data, not taking a political side here. But the data reveals a world that is deeply fractured.
The friction between these high-tech ambitions and physical borders is intense.
The data reflects a severe tug-of-war across the entire political spectrum. On one hand, we see texts analyzing conservative trade isolationism with titles like Trump's Trade War and Trump's Default, The Mist of Empire. Right alongside it, we see blueprints for radical progressive policies with AOC 2028, The Future of American Progressivism. Furthermore, there are indicators of massive global unrest. The Banyan Revolt, the Great Subcontinent Uprising, and a post declaring peace for Taiwan is possible.
The world is clearly on edge.
Finally, there is a book titled The $500 Billion Pivot, How the India-US Alliance Can Reshape Global Trade. So when you look at this data objectively, what does it tell you about the relationship between a trillion-dollar AI venture capital firm and fierce global conflict?
It tells you that in 2026, you cannot separate technology from geopolitics. They are the exact same battlefield.
Explain the mechanism there. Why does an AI company care about a subcontinent uprising?
Because of the physical supply chain. We go back to physical AWS. You cannot build a global logistics cloud if you are locked in a devastating tariff war that prevents you from moving physical goods across borders.
Right, borders get in the way of a seamless cloud.
More importantly, You cannot invest $55 billion in AI chips if you don't have access to the physical materials required to build them. Semiconductors require rare earth metals, neon gas, and highly specialized manufacturing facilities, many of which are currently concentrated in geopolitically sensitive areas like Taiwan.
Ah, so the article "Peace for Taiwan is Possible" isn't just a political aspiration. For the tech sector, it is an absolute existential requirement. If that supply chain breaks, the agentic AI revolution just runs out of hardware.
Exactly. The tech leaders realize that their utopian visions of abundance are entirely dependent on physical supply chains that are highly vulnerable to political instability. The tech industry can no longer operate in a purely digital bubble. They have to engage in nation building.
Which perfectly explains the book titled Rethinking Trade, a blueprint for a just and thriving global economy, and the post about a world war risk, geopolitical tensions in an interconnected era. The tech sector is realizing they have to rewrite the rules of global trade if they want their companies to survive.
Look at the title. A reorganized UN, built from ground up. That is the mindset of a Silicon Valley software engineer applied to global governance.
Oh, wow.
They're looking at the United Nations and saying, this legacy diplomatic system is buggy, inefficient, and prone to crashing. We need to deprecate it and rewrite the operating system of global diplomacy from scratch.
And the $500 billion pivot toward an India-US alliance suggests a massive strategic realignment. They are likely moving away from traditional manufacturing superpowers to secure those vital tech supply chains in regions they perceive as more stable or aligned with their technological goals.
It is a sandbox of monumental risk.
They are trying to usher in an age of abundance, curing cancer with photons, while simultaneously navigating the mist of empire and the literal threat of a world war over silicon chips.
The technology is reaching godlike capabilities, but it is tethered to a very fragile, very human geopolitical reality. A single embargo can shut down $1 trillion Solara.
Which brings us to the final and honestly the most surprising part of this entire snapshot. Amidst all these massive shifts, trillion-dollar AI suns, global uprisings, photons watching cells think, and spiritual economics, the source material leaves us with a strangely comforting reminder of what daily life actually feels like in 2026.
The micro-level contrast on this webpage is essential for understanding the era.
Because despite all the high-minded talk of agentic engineering and reorganizing the United Nations, there are incredibly grounded, almost quaint articles scattered throughout the sidebar.
Very human thing.
Yes. There is a Medium article titled The Joy of Typing. There is a Microsoft AI post honoring the humanity at the heart of care for Nurses Week. And then Paramendra himself has blog posts titled Side Hustles That Work in 2025 and Frugal Living Tips That Work.
It is a remarkable juxtaposition of scale.
It's almost comical. We are analyzing the Genesis mission to power the next American century with nuclear data centers, and right next to it, someone is just looking for frugal living tips to save a few bucks on groceries.
Or they are just enjoying a keyboard.
Right. They are writing a heartfelt essay about how much they enjoy the physical, tactile clack of a mechanical computer keyboard in an era where AI can generate a novel from a voice prompt.
I think this contrast is the ultimate anchor of the 2026 data. It demonstrates that even as the age of abundance approaches, even as AI becomes autonomous and logistics become fully virtualized, human nature does not fundamentally change.
We stay the same.
We remain anchored in our sensory and emotional realities. The AI can diagnose the patient, but we still value the human empathy and physical touch of a nurse holding a patient's hand.
The technology scales to the stratosphere, but human daily life stays remarkably grounded in the mud.
And if you track that thought all the way back to the beginning of the snapshot, the a16z spelling story perfectly encapsulates this tension.
It really brings the entire narrative full circle.
In that founding meeting, Ben Horowitz and Marc Andreessen weren't worried about the future of global commerce, the philosophical implications of agentic AI, or reorganizing the United Nations. They were just two guys in a room, sweating over a legal pad, trying not to look stupid, spelling a difficult name.
They were dealing with the basic, relatable, highly specific human insecurity.
Exactly.
They were just trying to survive the meeting without typing Androidson again.
The branded A16's notepad, because life's too short to Google the same last name twice, is proof that the human element survives technological revolutions. In fact, it often defines the shape those revolutions take.
That's a great point.
Our humor, our insecurities, our intellectual blind spots, our bizarre workarounds, these are the things that give character to the massive empires we build. We don't become less human as the technology advances to godlike levels. Our human quirks just get amplified on a much larger, more expensive stage.
That is perfectly said. So, to summarize this incredible journey into the 2026 internet, we started with Ben Horowitz's spelling bee nightmare that accidentally burst a venture capital icon.
A legendary troll.
Yes. We use that as a lens to examine a world where SpaceX is pivoting $55 billion to build AI chips because Mars requires local compute, and agentic engineering is replacing human coders entirely.
Then we looked at the physical side.
We looked at the dizzying ambition of API-ifying physical supply chains through physical AWS and trillion-dollar Solaras. We explored the desperate pivot towards spiritual blueprints like Kalkiism to maintain our societal soul when AI shatters traditional labor capitalism.
And the biology.
We saw human biology being hacked and rewritten with precigenetics and psychedelics, all while tech titans attempt to reorganize the UN to protect their fragile silicon supply chains.
It is a world operating at absolute maximum velocity, balanced on a knife edge of brilliant innovation and existential risk. But as we stand on the brink of this highly autonomous, AI-driven future, there is one critical perspective we should leave the listener with.
What's the final takeaway?
We spend an enormous amount of time and energy worrying about how we will compete with flawless agentic machine intelligence. We worry that our slow biological brains will become obsolete. But perhaps our greatest asset in the age of abundance won't be our intelligence at all.
What will it be?
Perhaps our greatest asset will be our distinctly human flaws.
The a16z story shows us that sometimes the things we cannot do, our limitations, our blind spots, our embarrassing mistakes, force us to pivot in completely unexpected directions.
And that leads to innovation.
And in that pivot, we create the most enduring, relatable, and successful innovations. An agentic AI will never misspell a name, but an AI will also never have the absurd, irrational humor required to turn a spelling mistake into a legendary, multi-billion-dollar brand identity. The flaw isn't a bug, the flaw is the feature. I absolutely love that. So, to you listening, what is the A16's workaround in your own life right now? What flaw, what limitation, or what slightly embarrassing gap in your skill set are you currently trying to hide that might actually be the foundation for your most brilliant success? Think about it. Embrace your inner androidson. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.